Welcome back, everyone, to the Wisdom of Lao Tzu.
Great to be back. In our last deep dive, we really journeyed into some fascinating territory with Lao Tzu, didn't we? Exploring that idea of living for the belly, not the eye, which was, a really profound invitation to nourish our inner world rather than just constantly chasing after external stuff, external stimulation. We talked about finding that sense of contentment within, which, let's face it, feels pretty radical in a world that's always telling us to look outside for happiness. Today, we're pushing even deeper. We're moving into chapter 13 of the Tao Te Ching. And this chapter, wow, it just plunges us right into the heart of human psychology. Really makes us confront our intricate and, let's be honest, often really fraught relationship with praise and blame. Just take a second.
You know that feeling, don't you? That instant, almost, involuntary urge to refresh a social media page.
Oh, yeah.
Just to see if your latest post has racked up a few more likes.
Totally. Or, the flip side, that disproportionate sting of just one negative comment, even if it's like buried in tons of praise.
Exactly. We chase that validation. We crave that favor, that external nod of approval. But so often in that chase, we end up feeling kind of exposed, vulnerable, almost unsettled.
Yeah, unsettled is a good word for it.
What if that craving, that deep-seated desire for external approval isn't actually nourishing us? What if it's actually a subtle, maybe even corrosive trap?
It's a huge question, really, and it cuts right to the heart of how we build our sense of self, our worth, especially now, in the modern world. That very feeling you described, being unsettled, whether it's by the glow of praise or the chill of criticism, that's precisely what the ancient philosopher Lao Tzu was looking at, maybe 2,500 years ago.
Right. It's amazing how relevant it still feels.
It really is. He saw this fundamental human dynamic playing out back then, and his insights, they still feel startlingly on point today.
Absolutely. And, well, that's our mission today, isn't it? We're diving deep into a truly radical idea from Lao Tzu, specifically from chapter 13 of his foundational, and let's be honest, pretty enigmatic text, the Tao Te Ching.
Yeah, it's dense stuff sometimes.
Definitely. He looked at the human condition, at our emotional reactions, and he famously declared that favor and disgrace are things that startle.
Such a simple line, but wow.
It seems simple, right? But there's so much depth packed in there. So today, we're going to explore why he believed that both praise and contempt might be two sides of the very same coin.
Equally alarming.
Equally alarming, yeah, to our inner peace, and how this ancient wisdom fundamentally challenges our modern understanding of happiness, self-worth, and maybe even what makes a good leader.
And to really unpack this, we're drawing from quite a rich collection of sources, ancient texts, obviously, but also modern scholarly takes.
Right.
Our main source, of course, is the Tao Te Ching itself, different translations, various commentaries, trying to get at the nuances of Lao Tzu's original language.
Which is key, because translation matters so much with texts like these.
Hugely. But we're also leaning on some invaluable insights from contemporary scholars who've dedicated their lives to this stuff. We'll be touching on works like Chad Hansen's A Taoist Theory of Chinese Thought, A.C. Graham's Disputers of the Tao, Hans-Georg Mahler's The Philosophy of the Tao Te Ching, and the really comprehensive entries on Taoism and Lao Tzu from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
Okay, good resources.
Yeah, they're crucial for getting the historical context, right? The Warring States period was a pretty intense time.
For sure.
And understanding the linguistic subtleties, the original Chinese, plus the ongoing philosophical debates that still swirl around these ideas. These scholars help us bridge that huge gap in time, making this ancient wisdom feel accessible, maybe even applicable today.
So our guiding question for this deep dive is, well, it's a challenging one. What if seeking favor isn't a source of strength or even nourishment, but actually a kind of subtle poison, as corrosive to our peace as any outright insult? And what does this reveal about the very self we spend so much energy trying to protect and elevate and validate?
That's a lot to chew on.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try and unpack this. So to really get into this radical idea, we have to go straight to Lao Tzu's own words, chapter 13 of the Tao Te Ching. His statements are, well, they're incredibly concise, aren't they?
Deceptively simple.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they just ripple with meaning. You can contemplate them forever. He starts by saying, and I'll just quote it directly here, favor and disgrace are things that startle. That which is valued and that which is feared are as if they were your own body. And then he keeps going right to the core of it. The reason I have great fear is that I have a body.
The body or the self.
Right. And then he poses this almost haunting question. If we had no such body, what fear would remain?
That concept of startle, it's pretty potent, like you said. It's not just, oh, a mild surprise.
No.
It implies being really alarmed, shocked, right? A jolt to your inner balance, your equilibrium.
Yeah, like an electric shock almost.
Exactly. And we can easily get why disgrace or public humiliation or harsh criticism would startle us. I mean, it hurts. It
Obvious.
threatens our reputation. It's unpleasant, often damaging. But Lao Tzu's genius here is saying that getting favor, getting praise, getting that recognition is equally startling.
That's the counterintuitive part.
Totally. Equally unsettling to our inner state. Why? Because the moment you get that favor, you simultaneously grasp the fear, the immediate underlying fear of losing it.
Ah, right. It's built in.
It's totally built in. The joy of recognition is just like inextricably linked to the anxiety of it being taken away. It's a package deal. You can't have one without the other.
That makes so much sense. It's like
Yeah.
you get a promotion, right?
Yeah.
And there's that first rush, that elation, like, yes, I made it.
Mm-hmm.
But then, almost immediately, the anxious thoughts start creeping in. Can I actually do this job? Can I keep this up?
What if I mess up?
What if I fail? What if they find out I'm not really qualified? What if someone else does better next time? It's that constant nagging worry,
Yeah.
a vulnerability that just comes with having something to lose.
Exactly. And Lao Tzu really nails the root cause of this, doesn't he? He says the core of our great fear is having a body or a self.
Right. And he doesn't just mean the physical body, does he?
No, not just flesh and bone. It's more about the existence of a distinct, vulnerable self, an ego, you could call it, that can be affected, impacted by things outside of it.
Okay.
He's basically saying if we didn't have this defined me that can be praised or criticized, that can gain or lose status, well, what would there actually be to fear?
Wow. That's a truly radical thought. It suggests the very fact that we have a defined me, a self that's separate, that can be impacted by external stuff, that wants things and avoids things. That is the fundamental source of our deepest anxieties, our emotional roller coaster.
Precisely. And this leads him directly to his really counterintuitive, often misunderstood conclusion. It's a profound paradox.
Yeah.
He states, "He who values his body more than the world can be entrusted with the world. He who loves his body more than the world can be entrusted with the world."
Okay, now that's where it gets really interesting. And I bet for a lot of listeners, that line immediately makes you go, wait, what?
Mm-hmm. How does that work?
How can someone who supposedly puts themselves first, above everything else, possibly be qualified to lead or care for the world? On the surface, that sounds incredibly selfish.
It really does.
Value your own body more than the world. And that seems like a recipe for, I don't know, supreme egoism or just completely disregarding others and the common good.
Right, like a tyrant's charter.
Exactly. So what is Lao Tzu actually trying to say here? Is he just being provocative? Or are we fundamentally misunderstanding what he means by self or body?
It's the absolute central paradox of this chapter, and it forces us, absolutely forces us, to rethink our usual, often Western ideas about self and selflessness. Yeah.
Lao Tzu is definitely inviting us to look way beyond the surface meaning of those terms.
Okay, so let's delve into this core wisdom then. Why exactly are favor and disgrace equally startling? We touched on it, but there must be something deeper than just, fleeting anxiety.
There is, yeah. At its heart, both favor and disgrace represent a kind of profound loss of autonomy.
Lot of autonomy, okay.
Think about it. When your happiness, your emotional balance, your sense of self-worth becomes dependent on external validation, on someone else's praise or their judgment, or just the whims of public opinion, you've basically handed over the controls.
Right. You're not driving anymore.
Exactly. You've surrendered control of your inner state. Your emotional landscape just becomes a weather vane, right? Constantly pushed around by the shifting winds of what other people think. If you're chasing favor, you're constantly adjusting yourself, maybe even twisting your actions or beliefs just to meet those external expectations.
So you're not acting from your own center anymore.
You're not acting from an internal compass. You're using an external, really unstable one. So whether it's a positive judgment from outside or a negative one, it pulls you off balance.
Yeah.
Your peace isn't coming from inside, from some stable sense of worth, but from something inherently shaky and uncontrollable out there.
Yeah.
It makes you almost, a puppet of circumstance.
Precisely. And some interpretations push this even further. They suggest a truly radical view that favor itself can actually be a form of disgrace.
Wow. Okay, how so?
Well, the price you pay for getting it often involves losing some dignity, right? Giving up some independence, maybe compromising your authenticity.
Hmm.
You might find yourself subtly twisting who you really are just to keep that approval coming, becoming less genuinely you. Scholar Michael Lafargue, for instance, he points out that the Laoists criticize desire, including the desire for fame or external approval, not mainly on moral grounds, like it's bad to want fame,
Right.
but precisely because it causes mental agitation. It disturbs that crucial inner stillness and contentment. So, gaining fame, paradoxically, rather than losing it, is often the real quiet source of inner turmoil. It's the constant stress of keeping up the facade.
That's a powerful thought. And deeply unsettling, actually,
Mm.
that in chasing the applause and craving that favor, you might actually be demeaning yourself, becoming something you're not. It's like a form of self-betrayal just for external gain. You're giving away your own power.
You are. And the wise person, the sage, gets this on a deep level. They see favor and disgrace not as opposites, good versus bad, but as two sides of the exact same coin.
Hmm.
Both are just born from unstable external judgments.
Okay.
So they stay vigilant. They cultivate an inner peace, like a deep well of calm that isn't attached to either. It doesn't depend on whether people clap or criticize. This is where we see that cultivation of qualities like softness, stillness, emptiness in Laoist thought, as Lafargue mentions.
Right, those core Taoist virtues.
Right, exactly. The Singha's emotional calm, as Mahler highlights, stops them from being swayed by all the agitation that comes from these external attachments. And what's really fascinating here is how starkly this contrasts with, common goals in society today.
Oh, completely.
We're often explicitly encouraged, aren't we? Seek recognition, climb the social ladder, build your personal brand, get more followers.
It's totally countercultural, isn't it? Our society often teaches us strive for status, build that public persona, gain influence, amass followers. But Lao Tzu seems to be saying the very pursuit of these things is what makes us vulnerable and paradoxically unhappy.
Mhm.
Which brings us back to that incredibly profound and maybe initially confusing line, the reason I have great fear is that I have a body. This seems to point right at the core problem, doesn't it? The whole concept of the self.
It absolutely does. This specific line, though it seems simple, really ignited a long-running philosophical debate in Chinese thought. Was Lao Tzu advocating for, like, a supreme egoism, a radical selfishness?
Yeah, look out for number one.
Or was this actually a call for a much deeper, maybe more profound kind of selflessness, one that goes beyond our usual understanding?
Okay.
The subtlety, as you rightly pointed out, is all about what self actually means in this context.
Right, it's not straightforward.
Not at all. Scholar A.C. Graham offers a really crucial insight here. He explains that rejecting power or external influence to preserve your personal integrity, that's not selfishness in the narrow sense.
Okay.
It's more about maintaining an internal coherence, right? A stable inner core that isn't just blown around by the winds of external opinion. It's about preserving who you genuinely are deep down.
Ah, okay. So it's not selfish in the greedy way, like hoarding stuff or ignoring others.
Yeah.
It's about protecting an inner state, a kind of psychological, maybe even spiritual independence, so that you can actually be more effective and aligned. That's a really important clarification.
Precisely. And this leads us to a critical distinction, one that scholar Liu Shaogan has articulated very clearly. It's about the Chinese character Shen,
Okay.
which can indeed be translated as both body and self. He points out that Lao Tzu seems to be using it to talk about two fundamentally different kinds of self.
Okay, let's unpack that. What are these two selves Lao is getting at? Because that really feels like the key to unlocking this whole chapter.
Okay, so first we have what we can call the small self, or, the ego.
The ego, right.
This is the self that's easily startled by praise and blame. It's the one that's deeply attached to reputation, status, material stuff, all those forms of external validation.
The one checking the likes.
Exactly, that's the one. This small self, according to Lao Tzu, is the direct source of our great fear, our constant agitation. As Lafargue explains, this self is driven by desires for external things, goods, fame, social standing, even things we think of as improvements in society. And the Laoists criticized these desires, again, not mainly because they were morally bad, but because they inherently cause mental agitation. They constantly disturbed that vital inner stillness and contentment needed for peace.
Right, they keep you stirred up.
Constantly stirred up. And furthermore, Mahler points out that this constant pursuit of distinction, of personal preference, of external recognition, which defines the small self, can easily become antagonistic. It creates divisions, us versus them, and that threatens social stability. It's the self that always needs to win or be right or be seen.
So the small self is the one refreshing the social media page,
Mm-hmm.
constantly seeking that fleeting hit of approval and then getting totally rattled when it doesn't come or when criticism hits.
Yeah,
It's inherently unstable because it's built on, like you said, shifting sands outside itself.
exactly. Shaky ground.
It's the self that feels compelled to constantly do something, achieve something, prove something because its whole sense of worth depends on it.
Precisely. A self of constant striving and anxiety. And then, in stark contrast, there's the true self. Or you could call it the great self.
Okay, the true self.
This is our authentic, fundamental nature. And Lao Tzu suggests it's only realized after you transcend the ego, after you move beyond that small self. This true self is unshakable, it's stable, it's deeply aligned with cultivating those qualities we mentioned earlier: softness, stillness, emptiness, steadiness, clarity, and what Laoists call femininity, which isn't about gender, really.
It's a principle.
It's a principle of receptivity, yielding power, as Lafargue notes. This true self isn't about a personal, separate consciousness in the way we usually think of it in the West. It's not a distinct you separate from everything else.
So what is it then?
It's more like an operational state of mind, a state of being that mirrors the self-so-ziran activity of the cosmos itself.
Self-so, naturally so.
Exactly. It's a state of being in harmony with the natural flow, effortlessly effective without all that ego-driven striving.
That's a huge distinction. It sounds like the true self isn't just an individual identity, like my unique set of beliefs and preferences,
Right.
but more like a fundamental state of harmony with everything. Can you maybe elaborate on the implications of these two selves, especially how it challenges maybe Western versus Chinese ways of thinking? Because for a Western listener, the idea of a perspectival self or a self that isn't defined by my unique inner experience, that might be quite a leap.
It's a crucial point, absolutely. And it highlights a fundamental difference in philosophical outlooks. In Western philosophy, especially since Descartes, the mind has often been seen as this distinct realm of ideas, an arguments on paper kind of view.
The I think, therefore I am.
Exactly, leading to sharp distinctions between mind and body, and a really strong emphasis on individual reasoning, individual consciousness. Our common sense, as Chad Hansen and the Stanford Encyclopedia entry on Taoism point out, often just assumes that individuals are sort of given in nature separate before any social interaction or purpose.
Right, we start as individuals.
Yeah, this primacy of the inner individual subjective point of view is just baked into Western thought. We're taught, find your unique voice, discover your individual truth, assert your independent self.
So we're encouraged to ask, who am I intrinsically separate from the world? That's the question.
That's often the central question, but Chinese thought, especially Taoism, tends to focus much more on know-how, practical adjustment, intuitive effectiveness in action.
Not just thinking, but doing. Or being.
More like being and doing harmoniously. The self isn't seen as a fixed thing, a hard, unchanging core. It's more like a perspectival self-fluid, part of a larger flow, always in relation to its environment. That idea of a purely inner subjective viewpoint, it plays almost no role in classical Chinese thought. It's much more about how do I operate effectively and harmoniously within this larger reality, rather than who am I, isolated from it.
That reframes everything. It shifts the focus from individual essence to relational harmony and practical wisdom. And that leads us to another key concept that kind of unifies this, which you mentioned, qi.
Ah, yes, qi.
How does this concept of qi connect the true self to this larger cosmic flow?
Qi is such a profound concept, and it's often badly translated as just matter or breath. It's much more than that.
Right.
Think of qi not as solid stuff, but as the fundamental non-material life force. The vibrant energy, the subtle breath that flows through absolute everything in the cosmos. Muller describes it as a common expression, maybe like how we use matter in English, but it represents a general, pervasive, non-material way of understanding the world.
Like the force, almost, but maybe less personified.
Kind of, yeah. It's the stuff the world is made of, but in an energetic, unifying way. Like a cosmic breath that connects all things. For Mencius, who was around the same time as Lao Tzu, but from a different school.
The Confucian school, right.
Right. For Mencius, qi provides the metaphysical underpinning for the sage's moral psychology. It's this flood-like qi that connects the sage to a universal world force. It makes the sage's actions perfect natural responses to any situation. It effectively unites the sage's individual Tao, their way, their actions, and the Tao of the world itself, as Hansen explains.
Wow.
So this reinforces the idea that the true self isn't isolated. It's a resonant connection with the fundamental energy of the cosmos. It allows you to act from a place of natural, effortless effectiveness. It's about being in flow with the universe, powered by Qi.
That's a powerful image. The true self, not just an individual state, but plugged into the cosmic energy grid almost. And you mentioned the Taoist infant earlier too. How does that seemingly innocent image fit into this? The true self cultivating energies. It still sounds a bit abstract.
The Taoist infant is a really key, very rich image in the Tao Te Ching. It particularly illustrates this concept of retaining and increasing your energies, your efficacy.
Yeah.
Moeller explains it serves as a model for maximizing your inherent power or efficacy, often translated as virtue, but it's closer to potency.
Potency, yay.
The infant embodies pure potential. They are utterly potent, full of latent energy, yet completely without ego,
Right.
without self-consciousness. They're just being. This idea of the Tao of sex in this context, it's not about literal sex.
Okay, good to clarify.
Yeah, it's a paradox. Potency without ejaculation. It precedes even the distinction between sexes and ego-driven desires. It represents a state of pure, undifferentiated energy.
True potential.
Exactly. This image demonstrates the sage's non-action, wu wei, and their indistinctness, which paradoxically enables all distinct activities to unfold optimally around them. It signifies that state of pure potential and harmony before the ego's distinctions and desires grab hold. It reflects the ultimate aim of the true self. The sage, like the infant, is without heart, meaning without personal bias, not guided by their own ego-driven desires. Instead, as Muller notes, they take the heart of the common people as the heart. It's about being fully present, fully capable, but without all the baggage of the small self.
That's a truly profound reframing of what it means to be powerful or effective. Not through imposing your will, but through a kind of effortless, enabling presence that mirrors the natural world. Okay, this leads us perfectly back to that initial paradox about leadership. Lao Tzu says, the one who values his body more than the world can be entrusted with the world. So if the mainstream view often champions the selfless sage, the one who puts others first, how does this person who seemingly prioritizes themselves become the ideal leader? It still feels quite counterintuitive.
It's the ultimate paradox politics, as Mahler perfectly calls it. The conventional understanding, especially in many Western traditions, is exactly that. Leaders must be self-sacrificing, put the world or the people before themselves, even if it harms them. We kind of glorify the martyr leader.
We do.
But Lao Tzu suggests the opposite. The person who genuinely understands and cherishes their own essential being, their true self, that stable, internal, core will, by extension, profoundly cherish the lives of all people.
Oh.
They won't recklessly sacrifice citizens for some abstract notion of glory or make short-sighted decisions driven by a corporate ego or personal ambition like we see so often. Their internal stability, rooted in their true self, translates into a profound, universal respect for life itself.
So it's not self-interest in that narrow, greedy, me-first sense. It's a deep, fundamental self-respect that then naturally expands outwards. If you truly honor your own life, your own intrinsic worth, you're far better equipped to honor and protect the lives of others. That really does flip the script on conventional leadership wisdom.
It completely flips the script. Precisely. Yeah. And this is beautifully reflected in what scholars Ames and Hall call the Wu forms of Taoist deference.
Mo forms.
Things like non-coercive action, wu wei, knowing without needing fixed rules, wu zi, and desiring without seeking to possess, wu yu. These require putting yourself in the place of others, genuinely incorporating their perspective into your own way of being, not as some moral duty, but as a natural extension of seeking harmony. This striving without contentiousness, wuxing, is why, paradoxically, no one can contend with them. They're not fighting against the flow. They become part of the flow. So there's nothing to resist. They don't create opposition because they don't oppose in the first place.
So the sage ruler is almost like a cosmic conductor. Not actively playing the instruments, not forcing the notes, but ensuring the whole orchestra is in perfect harmony, allowing each part to naturally fulfill its purpose without getting in the way. They don't need to be seen or celebrated.
That's an excellent analogy, a perfect conductor. Mahler further describes the ideal Taoist ruler as hidden, almost invisible, like the deep, unseen root of a vibrant plant. It nourishes the whole tree but doesn't demand any attention. They're also portrayed as almost like an idiot or an infant that does not yet smile. meaning they're without pretension, without ego, without the cleverness or cunning that the small self values. They are without heart in the sense of personal bias or an ego-driven agenda. Instead, they take the heart of the common people as the heart.
Hmm.
This non-action, wu wei, is radical. They do not act, and the people change by themselves. They love stillness, and the people correct themselves. This is the essence of paradox politics. Their very non-interference, their lack of ego-driven meddling, is believed to allow society to function optimally. Why? Because it removes the ruler's desires and judgments as a constant source of agitation and imbalance. It's leadership by embodying perfect stillness and allowing natural order to just emerge.
That's a profound critique of humanism as we often understand it, isn't it? We frequently celebrate human judgment, our likes and dislikes, our moral distinctions, our active shaping of society.
Right, our ability to discern and choose.
But Moeller points out that from a Taoist perspective, these very distinctions, while making humans unique, can so easily become antagonistic. They threaten social stability. The human impulse to approve or disapprove, like or dislike, classify, categorize. It too easily leads to conflict. Partisan struggle.
The us versus them again?
So the sage ruler, therefore, refrains from imposing moral judgments to prevent that struggle. They embody a profound neutrality instead. This non-humanist approach stands in such stark contrast to many Western ideas of active, morally driven governance and leadership, which often seek to enforce a particular vision of the good.
It's a call for a fundamentally different kind of wisdom in leadership. One that understands that intervention, no matter how well-intentioned, often stirs things up more than it helps, precisely because it introduces the small self's desires and distinctions into the complex flow of the world.
Right.
And this non-intervention extends even to warfare. Lao Tzu views war with deep, deep skepticism. The Dai De Jing portrays it not as heroic or glorious, not as a tool for justice.
No glory in it.
None. It's fundamentally a social disaster, a profound failure of politics. Weapons are seen as tools of last resort for deterrence, prevention maybe, to be handled with extreme caution and regret, not for display or aggression.
Okay.
Mahler states that the Taoist general doesn't fight for a moral agenda or for glory. They fight simply to win with the absolute minimal damage. They view any idea of a just or liberating war as nothing more than the pompous self-aggrandizement of a social loser.
Wow. That's blunt.
It is, but it aligns directly with the sage's rejection of all ego-driven actions. It highlights their deep commitment to peace and minimizing harm, seeing coercion as just, anathema to human flourishing. True leadership, in this view, actively avoids the very conditions that lead to such devastating outcomes in the first place.
That's a truly sobering perspective, especially given how often we, romanticize war or try to find moral justifications for it in our modern stories. It just strips away all the pretense and gets right down to the raw cost, rooted in ego. Okay, so these are incredibly ancient and profound ideas, but how do they translate into our lives, our modern, fast-paced, hyper-connected lives? Can we see the Tao in life today, in our everyday experiences?
Oh, absolutely. Lao Tzu's insights are remarkably prescient, I think. Let's consider a couple of modern examples just to make these principles more tangible, bring them down to earth a bit.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
Think about two CEOs, let's call them Alex and Sarah, both leading major corporations, facing similar pressure, similar opportunities.
Yeah, Alex and Sarah. Got it. How do they embody the attached self versus the valued self in the boardroom?
Well, Alex, let's say, represents the attached self in that corporate world. His personal identity is deeply merged, maybe even completely consumed by his company's stock price, its quarterly reports, its image in the media.
His whole identity is the company.
Pretty much. He lives in a constant state of startle, right?
Yeah.
Elated by positive press, glowing analyst reports, but absolutely devastated by negative headlines or a dip in market share.
Riding the wave.
Totally. His decisions are often short-sighted, driven by this corporate ego that reacts impulsively to external favor and disgrace, rather than a clear internal vision for long-term value. He might make a rash acquisition just to goose the stock short-term, or cut corners on ethics to impress investors and avoid criticism, all to protect that fragile, externally dependent, small self of his corporate identity. He's always trying to stuff himself or overdo it, as Lafargue describes those actions driven by desires that cause mental agitation. His sleep is probably disturbed by market swings, his mood dictated by the news cycle.
I can picture that perfectly. Always reacting, always on high alert, trying to control that uncontrollable external perception. It sounds exhausting and probably pretty ineffective in the long run.
Totally exhausting. Now, compare that to Sarah. She embodies the valued self. She's cultivated a clear separation between her true self, her core being, and the company's reputation, its stock price, the latest media hype.
Okay, she has some distance.
She is distance.
Hmm.
So when a major crisis hits, say, a big product recall, something that threatens years of work, she doesn't panic. First, she protects her own clarity, her own well-being, her internal calm. She refuses to let the external chaos dictate her inner state.
Hmm.
She values her body, her true self, by prioritizing her inner balance, her clear thinking. She refuses to get drawn into the startle of the situation.
Okay.
And this internal stability is what allows her to lead effectively. She can make calm, strategic decisions based on principle and long-term vision. She can prioritize the actual health and mission of the company, protect its healthy self, even if it means taking temporary hits to the stock price or public image.
Right, she played as the long game.
Exactly. And by doing that, she proves she can actually be entrusted with the world, or in this case, her multi-billion-dollar company, because her leadership isn't driven by her ego. Her actions come from a place of clarity, inner peace, not from fear or a desperate need for external applause.
That makes so much sense. Her internal calm becomes her greatest strength, her biggest asset in navigating those external storms. It lets her see clearly when everyone else is freaking out in that state of startle.
You also mentioned the modern influencer as an example. That world seems almost custom built on external validation. It feels like a perfect, if sometimes painful, illustration of Lao Tzu's warnings.
It really is. It's almost a literal real-time demonstration of these principles playing out globally. Consider an influencer whose entire self becomes fused with their online persona.
Yeah.
Their sense of worth, their daily happiness, it's all entirely dependent on external favor. The likes, the comments, the follower count, the viral shares. Their identity isn't internal. It's just a reflection in the digital mirror.
So when that person gets canceled, faces a huge public backlash, a significant public disgrace, that ego self just shatters.
Right. Because there's nothing underneath it.
Exactly. It causes great fear, profound distress, a very public startle that can feel like the absolute end of their world. Their desires for external validation, for those impressive appearances, for constant attention have led directly to immense mental agitation and an incredibly unstable sense of self.
Right.
Just as Lafargue's analysis of desire would predict.
We've seen this play out so many times, often quite tragically, that public fall can be incredibly devastating because their identity is just so completely tied up with that external fragile thing.
Exactly. But in some cases, we've also seen these individuals step away. They disconnect. They get off the hamster wheel, away from the digital noise, the constant refreshing, the tyranny of the comment section. And in that disconnection, sometimes they start to discover a self that exists without needing all that external validation, a self that's stable, authentic. Maybe they find their true self. And when or if they come back to the public eye, it's often with a profoundly different energy. They might share a quieter life, maybe prioritize internal peace. They might say something like, our example, you know what? I value my sleep, my peace, more than traffic, meaning online attention, fleeting fame.
Right. They've shifted their values.
They've let go of the attached self, that ego-driven persona, to find and really value the true self, prioritizing internal contentment, inner balance over those external metrics. Moeller notes that the Taoist attitude towards desire is primarily preventative. It aims to achieve perfect contentment now, in the present moment, by preventing those insatiable cravings that always project satisfaction into some future that never quite arrives. That influencer's journey in those cases really mirrors that ancient wisdom directly, finding peace by letting go of the chase.
These examples really hit home because they're so relatable, aren't they? Whether it's corporate life or just personal identity in this digital age, it makes Lao Tzu's wisdom, 2,500 years old, feel incredibly current, urgent even. So if we want to actually practice this, to begin to cultivate this distinction between the small self and the true self in our own lives, where do we even start? It feels big.
It can feel big, yeah. But there's a practical, pretty accessible way to begin. It involves keeping what we could call a favor and disgrace journal.
Okay, a journal. I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
How does it work? Is it just about tracking negative stuff, like a complaint log?
No, definitely not. That's critical. If it were just about the negative, you'd miss Lao Tzu's core insight entirely.
Right, because favor is startling too.
Exactly. So each day, you simply note down a moment that startled you, just like he described. This could be positive, a moment of favor, praise, recognition, a genuine compliment, maybe a sudden surge of pride. Or it could be negative, A moment of disgrace, criticism, rejection, feeling slighted, experiencing shame. The key is just to notice any moment where your internal state got significantly jolted by something external.
So not just the bad stuff, but the good stuff too.
Yeah.
That's crucial, isn't it? Because Lao Tzu explicitly says both are startling, both pull us off center.
Precisely, that's the whole point. For each entry, you'd then jot down 3 things, just brief notes. First, the event. What happened specifically? Just the facts, objective as possible. Try to strip away the immediate judgment.
Okay, just what occurred.
Second, your emotion. What was your gut reaction? Was it anxiety, elation, shame, anger, pride? Did you feel suddenly important or suddenly deflated? Really pay attention to that initial unedited feeling. Be honest with yourself.
And the raw feeling.
And third, your observation. Which self got triggered? Was it that small self, the one craving approval and external validation, the one constantly trying to impress or protect its reputation or reacting defensively?
Sure.
Or was it your stable inner true self, the part that, despite the external event, kind of remained unperturbed, calm, grounded? Was your fundamental sense of worth shaken, or did it actually remain intact underneath the surface reaction?
So it's like becoming a detective of your own inner world,
Yeah.
observing your reactions from a slight distance. It sounds like a form of mindfulness practice almost.
It is, exactly, a form of mindful awareness. And the goal isn't to become numb, right, or to suppress your reactions. That's not Taoist wisdom at all.
No.
It's about becoming a skilled observer of your reactions, developing a kind of detached awareness, a capacity for self-reflection, by clearly seeing the fragile, externally dependent small self in action, seeing how it reacts, how it chases approval, how it fears loss, how it gets agitated. You start to identify it as something separate from your deeper being.
Yeah, you create some space.
Yeah, exactly. In that very act of identification, you create a space, a critical distance, and that allows you to loosen its grip. This space then allows you to move closer to identifying with and living from the unshakable true self. Mahler emphasizes this kind of practice is about cultivating emotional calm and gaining really profound insight into your relationships with yourself and with the world around you. It's about realizing that true satisfaction, real contentment, is only possible when desires don't violate a perfect contentment with just how things are right now. This journal is just a tool, a gentle guide towards that contentment.
That's a powerful and incredibly accessible practice.
Yeah.
It really brings Lao Tzu's philosophy down into the everyday, makes it actionable. Okay, so to sort of reiterate the main message here from chapter 13, Lao Tzu's profound wisdom offers this really radical guide, doesn't it, for life and for leadership.
It really does. It suggests that only the person who truly cherishes their own essential being, that true self, that unshakable core that isn't swayed by external praise or blame, only that person can truly be trusted with the world. This wisdom fundamentally challenges our modern chase for external validation. It urges us to understand that true peace, inner contentment, and genuine effectiveness in what we do, they come from within.
Not from out there.
Not from out there. They stem from a self that is unswayed by the fleeting currents of favor or disgrace. A self rooted in its own authentic nature, not in what other people think. That's the path to true power and peace.
It's a powerful call to just reorient our compass, isn't it? To look inwards for our validation instead of constantly seeking it outside. As we wrap up this deep dive, here's maybe a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over.
Okay.
Consider that old phrase, ignorance is bliss. Lao Tzu's critique of what he calls knowledge, which Lafargue identifies mostly as that conceptual knowledge people pride themselves on, and which Mahler says disturbs mental stillness, well, maybe it's just a deliberate cultivation of certain kind of unknowing.
Indeed. A letting go of knowing.
Yeah. If the Tao that can be told is not the invariant Tao, and the names that can be named are not the invariant names, as chapter 1 famously says,
Right, the limits of language.
then what essential truths might we be missing by constantly trying to name, define, categorize, and validate everything, including ourselves, all through external means? What if true wisdom lies not in knowing more, not in piling up more information or external validation, but in letting go of that desperate need to know everything? Especially about how others see us, it's that profound skepticism, as Hansen notes, that underpins so much of Taoism.
What if true liberation comes from embracing that deeper unknowing and just being?
Something to ponder indeed, letting go of the need to be defined by the external gaze. Join us next time on The Deep Dive as we continue our exploration of Lao Tzu's profound wisdom. We'll turn our attention to the Tao itself, described in Chapter 14 as something that looked at, it cannot be seen. Listened to, it cannot be heard.
The great mystery.
Exactly. What secrets does this invisible, inaudible mystery hold? And how does it relate to these ideas of the self and our quest for peace that we've unpacked today? We'll see you then.